Hi everyone, welcome to the after lunch session titled Rethinking Labor at Sea, Overcoming and Enduring Inequalities. So our panel for today consists of Angelos Vlachos, CEO of the Kavala Port Authority in Greece, Anil Devli, CEO of the Indian National Shipowners Association, Helene Tofte, Executive Director of the Norwegian Shipowners Association, Luisito de los Santos, Director of Planning and Policy at the Maritime Industry Authority in the Philippines, and Shyam Jagannathan, the Director General of Shipping in India. Our moderator for this session is Sophie Deon, who's the team lead for policy and government engagement at the Global Maritime Forum in Denmark. Before we start our panel, I would like to give the stage to Mr. Jagannathan for some scene setting. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon. Rethinking labor at seas. I have been given this privilege of having the scene setting. If you look at the international scenario, we are going through a cusp of very interesting times. You look at the geopolitical reality, you see conflict, you see uncertainty. If you look at technology transition, specific to the maritime domain, at one end of the spectrum, you're talking autonomous ships, you're talking alternate fuels, you're talking quicker turnaround times, you're talking about a whole intensive compliance mechanism. While you're also talking about ships going bigger, more complex, and ports competing amongst themselves as logistics and freight movement service providers. We're contending with multiple issues, not just the climate change, smaller subliminal issues like smuggling, human trafficking, contraband. It's in this context, in the maritime domain, for India, we are the third largest seafaring nation. Close to around 12% of the global seafaring pool, with the other nations such as China, Philippines, Indonesia, Russia. And the Ministry of Ports, Shipping and Waterways has put the objectives up front in the Maritime India Vision 2030. India aspires to transverse from the present 12% in the global seafaring pool to 20%, implying 1 out of every 5 seafarers would be an Indian. We are aware of how valued the Indian CDC and the Certificate of Competencies is. Ask any of the international ship management firms and employers. While we look at our national aspirations, shipping essentially is international. The Maritime Labour Convention 2006 lays and sets the standards to be complied with. At international forums like the International Maritime Organization, a UN specialized body, there are specific guidelines for fair treatment of seafarers. There are internationally agreed conventions such as SOLAS. They deal with safety of life at sea, and specific chapters are assigned for design considerations such as accommodation on board and what provisions are to be made available for a seafarer. You have the MARPOL Annex 6 specifying pollution control. Now the paradox here is, while we impose the regulatory and statutory framework, we also contend with criminalization of seafarers, issues of abandonment of seafarers. Ladies and gentlemen, India today is contending with 600 plus souls, seafarers, We categorize as abandoned. Abandoned meaning the recruiting placement service licensee is non-responsive. The P&I cover for the vessel is not available. The ship management has receded for multiple reasons. And it is on the nation to ensure that the basic fundamental rights of a seafarer stand protected by extraditing him from wherever he is, under detention or otherwise, back. Another major point that I would want to flag is the participation of women in seafaring. We have some stalwarts here. We in India recognize them. Captain Radhika Menon ma'am is here. They are pioneers in themselves, but they comprise less than 1% of the seafarer population in India. So what is to be done with women, and how do we promote seafaring as an avid avenue, both on board and also onshore? I would be requesting the panelists to debate the various vicissitudes of this. And as we go along, being privileged as the Director General of Shipping and such a forward-looking, progressively engaging, most populous, with the biggest demographic dividend and the democratic credentials of gold standard, we look forward to support this entire initiative to ensure the best quality of life and work conditions for seafarers on board. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And hello from my side as well. I'm Sophie Doyon and I work for the Global Maritime Forum. At the Global Maritime Forum, we think globally, and so I will just add a couple of global numbers to that introduction. We have today in the world about 1.9 million of seafarers, and we know that shipping contributes 90% of global trade. So there's an obvious mathematical calculation to be done in terms of what the role is and the importance of addressing their condition is. And one of the things and trends we've been identifying is one of deteriorating working conditions and reduction of costs in the industry for the workforce over the past decades. And that, of course, creates huge challenges in terms of attractiveness of the sector for seafarers and labor shortages, which can be detrimental to the industry overall. So I'm going to kick off immediately, because we're not here to listen to me today, with the first question, and I think I would like to start with you, Louis, but we are going to give an opportunity to all speakers to speak on all. We see quite different levels of implications and recruitments of seafarers over the world. In the global south in particular, there is a major portion of seafarers that come from the global south, but also a lot of abuses and mistreatments. So I would like you to tell us a little bit how can we work together to level the playing field for all seafarers and irrespective of their nationalities.
Good afternoon, Sophie, and to all panelists here. And would like to, first of all, congratulate the Observer Research Foundation for coming up with this kind of dialogue. You were able to bring the experts in maritime into a single stage. The way I see the issue is that seafarers are individuals, seafarers are persons, and they are imbued with human rights. I think all governments should view seafarers as individuals entitled to the protection of international laws. Unless we treat them this way and we shy away from the context that seeing them as purely commodity, certainly we'll never be able to provide just and humane treatment to our seafarers. But I would like to share you some experiences from the Philippines. Right now, we have more than 1 million seafarers who have been certified to have met the standards of the SCCW Convention. And at any given time, we have more than 500,000 seafarers on board various merchant ships. So the responsibility of the Philippines in ensuring that our seafarers receive just and humane treatment from our ship owners is really very challenging. So what did the government do? We operate on a whole of government approach, and we have this government department responsible for processing the contracts of all our seafarers. We adopted the standard employment contract. All seafarers should pass through that process, and all manning agencies must also ensure that the provisions of the standard contracts are fully complied with. In that way, our seafarers will be protected. Another thing is that we have existing regulations to penalize our manning agencies responsible for recruiting our seafarers, because our manning agencies are representatives of our ship owners. Because if we do not do this, we don't know how to run after ship owners, noting that the structure of ship registration is also very complicated. We have a ship owner coming from this country, registered the ship in another jurisdiction, and the crew is comprised of different nationalities. And we have heard also cases of abandonment. We have heard cases of medical repatriation. We have heard also instances of ship lost, ship attacked by reason of piracy or whatever. Whatever reasons are, I think our seafarers deserve all the treatment that we can give, and I think the government plays a great factor in this. And lastly, I think it's also very important that all governments should ensure that they give full and complete effect to the conventions, particularly the Maritime Labor Convention. And the Philippines just enacted a national provision providing our seafarers with ample protection wherever they get employed. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Louis. And I will stay on that continent, and I would like to ask you, Anil, to complement. We discussed yesterday, you told me that the Indian seafarers represent about 12% of the global workforce in maritime. What is your perspective?
Well, I will say this for starters, that it is not my view that seafarers are put to any great difficulty at all. Yes, by and large, I think, just like we work ashore, we have problems at the office. They have problems at office too. But I'm quite proud as an Indian ship owner that, thanks to the regular interaction that we have with the unions and I'm not saying this because the administrator is sitting here, but it is a fact. We have two of our administrators here, the current one and the past one. And I think the MLC and the fact that we are all willing to understand where the need for protecting seafarers comes from. But it is unfortunate that while this may not have a negative issue here in India, we do have a problem in respect of what the DG sir touched upon, is abandonment, for example. A few years ago, I know that at IMO, India presented a thought and a paper where we said that the flag state must take responsibility for abandoned ships. Because finally, the P&I only gives you wages for 2 months, and then thereafter everybody is struggling as to what to do, how do you bring and then the administration has to take on the cost of bringing people on. So we said flags must start taking responsibility, and it was quite surprising, and there is a huge silence on this for several years. And you will remember, sir, we were at IMO together in this, and where we said that flags must take responsibility. And I would like to once again raise this issue here in this room. I think flag states, as much as everybody wants to rush in and take ships under their flag, and we may not want to call them flags of convenience, they must take responsibility for being a flag and ensuring that if there is a seafarer on that ship, because as Louis just said, you could have a ship owner registered somewhere else, a resident somewhere else, his money coming in from a third location, and you can't really find out who the ship owner is. At a point like this, it must become the responsibility of the flag, just like in India. My flag takes responsibility for my seafarer. Every flag on which the vessel, which is an abandoned vessel, etc. And I very, very strongly would urge all of us in this room that we must support this thought and push this forward in the agenda in the IMO, that flag must take responsibility for the seafarer who's been abandoned. Even if we can achieve that one thing, I think we would have done much. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So we've talked about the role of ship owners and the role of flag states. I will hand over to Ellen from the ship owner side from Norway.
Thank you very much, and thank you to Aura for raising such an important discussion. That's very highly appreciated. I think perhaps I will take another angle just to sort of add some variety to the discussion. And I think it's important to start to say that for shipping at large, this is a very important discussion, and it's if we do not manage to secure attractive workplaces for the future, today and for the future, this would be very bad for the industry as such. I mean, that's why we engage so heavily in these issues. We will lose in international competition if we do not manage to secure good and sound working conditions. And I think also this discussion adds on to sort of the larger discussions that are in shipping today. We have to secure the good working condition for the individual worker. It's been mentioned already. But if we are to sort of make sure that shipping remains competitive, we also have to look at this at the larger picture. There's a need for more crew. There's a need for different skilled workers. We have to decarbonize our industry. We're going to digitize our industry. So we have to make sure that we don't lose competition, because there will be a stronger competition for workforce going forward. So the discussion is important for the individual seafarer, in which we have an obligation and to secure that they have a sound working environment. But it's also important for the future of the industry. And I think we're here to share experience, and I think from the Norwegian side, I mean, it's already been mentioned, it's very important to have global regulation. We are in a global industry, so that's sort of the way of securing the rights for all the seafarers. But I think also we have an obligation as an industry to do more, and I hope I can bring into some examples from Norway as we continue this discussion.
Absolutely, and we'll have the opportunity to dive in a bit on concrete examples. Angelos, I would like to hand over to you now from the port side.
From the port side and also from a more academic perspective, I would say that first, Global South is a well-documented term speaking to the developing countries that are suffering so much from the maritime labor. But to understand what the political economy of maritime labor is, we have first to take into account the very exact subject of our discussion. Speaking about seafarers, yes, but speaking about also fishermen and the international waters. Do you know the percentage of the fishermen from the south at the international waters is like 80% of the whole. Not to mention also, not to forget, offshore wind energy or shipbuilding and shipwrecking. So first we should take into account we have a wide spectrum of categories belonging to this. The second is, yes, in the seas, it has been mentioned before. There's no disagreement over that. We have legal restrictions that they're not applied, they're not implemented the way they should. This discussion about the flags of convenience actually is the holy grail. This is the truth. This is where we should focus. At the very end, this is where the debate is going to spot. Finally, the international agreements, such as the United Nations Convention for the Law of the Sea, also understood as a constitution of the sea, doesn't solve the problem. It doesn't solve the problem insofar it expresses rhetorical declaration instead of giving us specific and solid answers. In our debate, however, beyond the seafarers, speaking about the global south, we should also take account another parameter which is often missing from our side, the vulnerability of the coastal population. This is very important. We should not think the seafarers just a part of their own, but also with the interaction with the coastal population. So having this into account, I think the rest has been said by my colleagues.
Thank you so much. And on your last point, I know you had issues with your flight yesterday, unfortunately, but there were really interesting conversations yesterday on the coastal communities. So I hope I can also connect you with some of the speakers.
I'd love to.
We'd like now to move to the second question, which is a little bit to zoom on discrimination and specifically on the condition of women in the workforce. We have a lot of reports, studies out there in the Global Maritime Forum. This is an issue that we really are keen to work on, and despite women being about 2% of the workforce, this is a huge one that needs to be addressed. There is a recent survey that shows that 29% of women surveyed in that context feel that they suffer from gender discrimination and that it affects their career evolution. It is quite a big percentage. So I would like to hear from all of you on what actions can be taken in the industry, by the industry, and also keeping in mind the different roles for the different actors. Anil, can I start with you? Or Louis, do you? No.
Hello. Thank you again, Sophie. I would like to share, of course, the experience that we have in the Philippines, because this is the limitation that I've got, particularly on our effort to include and to implement the context of diversity, inclusivity in the maritime industry. Annually, the Philippine government, particularly through our General Appropriations Act, mandates that we have to make use of 5% of the budget of each government agency to implement programs relating to gender and development. And that's mandatory. It's either it's a direct activity for gender and development, but also includes mainstreaming of our activities. In other words, all our activities within the context or within the framework of the Philippine government should include efforts to mainstream gender and development. Another thing is that we have been in touch with our industry leaders, and we have been encouraging them to implement also diversity in their respective offices. The Philippines is very active also in the Ship-to-Ship campaign. We have the maritime women in maritime Philippines, and we're also very active in women in Asia. And most of our women leaders have been leading also efforts to encourage other colleagues within the Southeast Asian region to promote diversity and inclusiveness. Right now, we have a good number of Filipino seafarers who are now women, and we are able to produce thousands of merchant marine officers already. But of course, if we're going to look into the total universe of Filipino seafarers, still the percentage of women is still very small. And for the next 5 years, the Maritime Industry Authority, the office where I come from, devised a strategic plan to mainstream or to involve more, to have more efforts to campaign for seafarers to join in the maritime industry, particularly the shipping. So we came up with a strategic plan that was crafted by both the government and industry. So we have been working together closely with the industry on how we'll be able to promote not only gender equality, but also inclusiveness. So we will also have gays, less, those who identify themselves as part of the LGBT community, they have been employed also as part of, part of our seafaring community.
Thank you. And just to spice it up, maybe Hélène, do you want to go next?
Yes, thank you. And thanks a lot. This is a topic that is very close to my heart and which we've been working on quite a lot in Norway. Let me just start by saying that, the focus on securing a safe working environment, that goes for both men and women. So, of course, the focus on and the discussions and processes in the IMO on bullying and harassments, that's important for both gender. But when it comes to gender equality and the work to attract more female to our sector, I think that's very important. And the way we looked at it in Norway is, the starting point for this is that as an industry, we need more talent. We need the right people to come and work for us. And then if we look at sort of the challenges ahead, for example, at the universities in Norway, there's a majority of women taking higher education. So if you only employ men, you will lose out on talent. That's sort of the starting point. We need the best people to come and work for us, and that means that we have to recruit not only from half of the population, but from both gender. So that's the starting point. And then I think there's a lot of things that we can do, and I think industry initiatives and companies sort of paving the way forward is very important. What we have done in Norway is to make sure that we promote some good role models. Just within my organization, we set ourselves some very clear targets. One of them is to have 40% women in our board, and we achieved that at the first election, so we have 40% women in our board. That's easy to achieve. All businesses can do that. We also decided that on all seminars, panels, there should be 40% women. Easy to achieve, but then you sort of point to and showcase some good role models for the industry. We also have worked together with the Norwegian government. The government has a declaration for how to work on increased equality in our industry. It's a good document. It exists in English, so it can be used as an example for how to work on it. And through the government, we sit together, the industry and also the labor organizations. We sit together and we discuss these things, and we see sort of what can be done, what can we do on a company level as an association and as Norway. And Norway has been also good at promoting this issue in the IMO based on the experience we have in Norway. We also measure this because I think it's important if you are to say if you achieved anything, you have to also measure yourself. So at the worldwide figures, there's 2% women seafarer. In Norway, it's 7%, so we still have a long way to go. But if you look at the ship owner companies as such, the percentages are higher, and that's also important that for women that are sailing, that you also give them opportunity to go abroad first to be sailing and then to come and work for the companies if that suits the woman better, because there's a lot of important experience to be made at sea, which also can then be very useful for the industry as such. And I also wanted to just to point to another few good examples, and a very good example here in India, because both the Norwegian government and my association has been involved in the SHEO initiative. And I think these national initiatives, sort of just putting these issues on the agenda, discussing it, I think that's very good. We are also working with Vista in Norway, which is the female organization for the shipping industry. So all these small initiatives, through this small initiative, we can achieve something, but it's also, of course, important, as was said already, that we get the good regulations in place, because I don't think neither women or men will come and work for the industry if we cannot at the same time secure a good and sound working environment.
Thank you, Hélène, and also for providing me for the perfect transition, Director General.
I just briefly wanted to flag the Nari Shakti Vandana bill. It talks about positive affirmation in the parliament, which is the highest legislative body in the country. So in the maritime sector, as was mentioned by my eminent colleague panelist in Philippines, we also fund up to 1 lakh rupees for every woman cadet taking up a maritime course. And that comes through with one of my co-trustees on the Maritime Training Trust. Mr. Anil Devli is also on the board. The second part is that the Directorate General of Shipping and my erstwhile esteemed predecessor in office is here, had come out with circulars which strengthen the gender participation and aims for gender parity. I think there are 4 interventions which are needed. One, at the entry level, you make a light shine on mercantile marine as a career, and ladies should be assured that as an independent, their own discretionary choice, a career in maritime is good enough. The second is essentially institutional support. As was mentioned in Philippines, 5% of a commitment of the budget for gender initiatives. A similar statement is being attempted under the banner of what from the Directorate General of Shipping is called the Sagar Mein Samman, honor at seas. Wherever a lady does come into the maritime fold, she is honored for her being an individual professional in the maritime domain. The third part, as ma'am had just mentioned, engaging with the ship management firms and concerns in including the percentage in the management structure. More women in the management structure will translate to more ladies in the maritime fold. And hopefully with these 3, the fourth being, let the ladies just decide for themselves how gender parity works, both on board and on shore. These 4 as a combination should help surmount that present dismal less than 1%, and globally, some countries like Tepi have done it. The Maritime India Vision talks about the 4 strategies they have engaged, and they are at 3%. So I think a lot of work needs to be done.
Thank you so much. And Angelos, I think you have your views on the management structure in particular, but also more globally.
I'm coming from a country with a long and strong maritime tradition. It's okay? I'm coming from a country with a long and strong maritime tradition, where women, at least the last decades, they do have the opportunity to continue their career. I haven't checked thoroughly the recent data, but my reckoning is that in my country are above the average percentage that was described today, which is, globally, like about 1 to 2%. Traditionally, Scandinavian countries, including Ukraine or Philippines, we do know that they do have this female presence. In my mind, there are a couple of, let's say, topics that should be changed. The first has to do with awareness. Traditionally, women were considered as better for caring jobs instead of for this supposedly, allegedly men's job as the maritime. You see, it's not just maritime, it's the whole of the transport industry one should take into account. So it's a whole culture related or used to be related in the past with the man's, the so-called macho culture, and this is something that has to be changed, and it's changing gradually the last decades, I do believe. The second thing, the impediments also have to do with certain facilities females need to have at their disposal when living aboard. This means investments. We should raise certain financial points at the very end of the day. If we want to go for inclusivity, it means we have to touch the very sensitive points that have to do with the financial factors. Yes, the ship owners should be pushed somehow to this direction. So it has to do with investments, having their own, let's say, facilities. It happens most probably not to the extent it should. So by having a better awareness, changing the culture, and having a certain, let's say, form of investments, my estimate is the prospects could be much better. Last but not least, the MLC should and could be amended so as to include certain, let's say, notions, certain concepts about the females at sea. And the same, to some extent, can be implemented at the national legislation. It's a matter of political will at the end of the day. It's a matter of pressure to both levels by the stakeholders also. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Before we move to the next question, Anil, would you like to add anything on this point?
Well, I think almost everything has been covered. So, but I think two important issues I'd like to flag here. One is that, is it any more an attractive proposition to come and work at sea? I think that is the question that one has to ask. So whenever I talk to mariners, and I find a doctor's son becomes a doctor, at least here in India, engineer's son becomes an engineer, but often mariners don't ask their children to become mariners. That is because the laws that control the way mariners work has now work against them. You know, the criminalization, the huge responsibility that is put on the master of the vessel, all of this makes life difficult as a seafarer. Therefore, when we talk about showcasing, what is also important is for all of us to, if we want more women, more people to come in and work in shipping, we need to ensure that this seafarers decriminalization is somehow taken care of. Because something goes wrong, the first thing you do is get hold of the master and put him in jail. So I think that's one important issue. One other thing that the DG Shipping didn't talk about, but showcasing success is also exceedingly important. We'll all agree this is an HR thing. In this room, we have Captain Radhika, who's our first lady captain, and we have Nilafar, who's the first lady pilot in India. Now, we need to talk about these people. We need to showcase them, because they will stand as inspiring stories for girls to come in and more people to come in, which of course our government does. But I think worldwide we need to start doing this, and therefore promote more and more girls to come in. The last third important point, quickly without not taking too much time, is design of ships. And I see nobody talks about this. Ships need to be designed better for ladies today. Otherwise you have common shower rooms. It just beats logic. How do you get a lady on board a vessel which has a common shower room? You can't. Disposal of hygiene. Lots of ships don't have facilities for disposal of hygiene. And then somebody is asking, what is this packet lying around? You can't do that. I mean, these are things that we need to start changing. So ship design has to change in order to ensure privacy for women, privacy for their hygiene and for their daily needs.
Thank you so much. Very good ending. And I would like to also jump on your point on success stories to say that we talked about the role of different actors in the industry, in the public sector. There are initiatives like Diversity at Sea Pilot that brings together companies who try to change some of the rules, just test what works or not to improve the conditions of women. So those who are looking for ideas, I would also invite them to contact us at the Global Maritime Forum or some of the companies directly to exchange on what their experience has been with some of the concrete measures that are taken on harassment or parental leave, etc. Now we have about 12 minutes left, and I do want to leave time to comments and questions, because we do have important people in the room as well, as you just pointed out. So I would like to combine the two last questions in one. We have changing regulations. We touched upon it briefly as well. At the IMO, we have the Maritime Labour Convention with new rules that will actually enter into force in December this year, but also EU legislation on corporate sustainability that will directly affect the maritime industry. I would like you to reflect briefly on what are the key barriers still for standards, increasing standards in the industry, and what are the key actions that some of industry members can take to lever these barriers. I would like to start with you, Angelos, if that's okay, and just go from you to the DG.
Yes. I would be quite brief. I would say there are three forms of barrier one can identify from the first sight: cultural, legislative, and financial. We said a few things about the cultural barriers. The perceptions about working at the sea has been expressed under several ways today, just before by my colleagues here, has to change. How it can be done? More motivations at all levels, speaking about the several countries and the ship owners as well, changing, let's say, the whole culture. Speaking about the legislation, though we all know there are certain pillars, as we call them, about the safety, the security and safety, the environmental protection, the labor, yet, what is the crucial point missing? How to interlink all of them. Secondly, how to aptly respond to questions or issues arising on the everyday life, not at the vague, let's say, theoretical level these legislations are talking. And thirdly, the financial factor, as I said before, has to do with the ship owners. One has to take into account, speaking about the maritime, the difference compared to other forms of human investment, of human capital, let's say. We have ship owners working under different countries, using also flags of convenience. Somehow this blurred working environment and legislative environment has to be changed, has to be improved, has to be more transparent. And this is the direction all stakeholders should orientate themselves towards. It's not easy. Instead of hiding ourselves beyond, as I said, sometimes rhetorics and positive words with positive colors, we should work with the arising problems of the industry, and we should use the experiences coming from the industry so as to deal with the problems, and not vice versa. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Anil, I will ask you to follow up, and let's keep it brief so that we try to have a short discussion with our audience.
So I would just repeat, if we are to increase standards, we need to increase the confidence that I would have when I board a vessel. I'll just say this much and not take too much time. That's it. We need to change law to ensure that I feel more confident as a seafarer today when I board my ship than I did yesterday.
I think everybody should work towards ensuring that we have a safety of navigation, we have seaworthy ships, and we have to ensure also that our crew are competent, that they know what they are doing on board. So this should be both the responsibility of the flag state and the ship owner.
I think the main barrier today is the culture. I think that's the reason why things are going too slowly. And it's challenging because we have to transform not one industry in one country, we're transforming a global industry. So that does take time. But right now, I think we need a cultural change across the industry. We are running out of time. We need to move on this quickly. I think the legislation will follow, and it is following. There's a good example of that. And especially in our industry, the regulation is important too, because that's the only way, global regulation through the IMO, that's the only way of reaching out to the whole industry, which we need to do.
I'll be brief. As I mentioned, there are 4 pillars to this. The first is regulatory action. You take strict action against surreptitious practices by manning agencies, run an authentic job portal, make it very confident to a lady joining on board a maritime carrier, and ensure compliances which are statutory. Information dissemination is basically all about social media connect, about basically celebrating personalities as had been mentioned here, showcasing them so that they are an inspiration and have the pull factor to bring more women into the maritime fold. From the flag state, a 24/7 grievance redressal mechanism, which specifically also works for the nature of SASH engagement, that is the harassment part, where you have the internal complaints committee part, a crisis management module, which is a very hands-on management, welfare steps like scholarships, motivational inputs, statutory inputs to companies for basically increasing the percentage in terms of affirmative action for women in maritime. And lastly, of course, very pertinently, in Philippines, they do a phenomenal annual sort of a platform called as Crew Connect. And that is something I think every maritime nation should aspire for. And the STCW revision, comprehensive revision, is just around the corner. IMO has already initiated that. Last was the STCW Manila amendments. And so perhaps the Indian Maritime Administration make a pitch for it, because there are 22 areas of engagement here, very closely also linked to gender parity in maritime.
Thank you so much, and to all of you in the panel for helping me keep the time and for your great points. I would like now to open the floor. We have about 5 minutes.
Can I ask, we are in new government, we've got a new government in the UK Parliament, the Labour government, and our Secretary of State for Transport is really keen that our labour laws are abided by on maritime, especially the national minimum wage, which we have, and also policies we are going to implement around something called fire and rehire that a certain company used recently. You'll know it was all very well advertised. So we want policies such as that to be a thing of the past. Now, how can countries work together to ensure that there isn't loopholes where companies can say, well, they're not under UK legislation, they're under sort of maritime legislation? Are we fighting a losing battle, or should we sort of stick to it, and will we get the protections for the workforce, which is what we actually are seeking to try to do?
Thank you. Do I have any volunteer?
Ma'am, I'll have a quick response to that. I think UK did some remarkable demonstrative action, and that needs to be replicated by other maritime administrations. The IMO has come out with something which is in the continuation of the MLC stipulations in the nature of fair treatment. However, for the gender part, and specifically for, as you said, if the management practices are such that you fire somebody or you sign off somebody, for instances, whatever are there, what statutory protection is being provided under the MLC other than the 2 months of wages that the P&I cover provides? Those we need to perhaps aggregate our strengths and ensure unison in ensuring a framework which provides for seafarers ubiquitously and universally.
Ellen, over to you.
Thank you, and thank you for that question. And I will not comment on sort of the national legislation in the UK, but I think just as a general comment from the industry side, I think it's so important that great maritime nations like the UK, like my country, Norway, and sort of all nations comes together and work on this collectively. We have an organization for this. We have the IMO, we have the ILO, because that's the only way of sort of making sure that we increase standards for everyone. And it's also challenging for an industry if you are exposed to national legislation. Sort of, if you go in one national waters, you have to abide to these rules. If you go to another water, you have to abide to these rules or these salary levels. The best thing for the industry, and I think for the workers on board, is to make sure that the big nations, that they work together and make sure that we have common standards, global standards, through the bodies that already exist.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. And I see a lot of nodding in the panel, which allows me to move to the next. I saw, first, you in the first table. Yeah, go ahead.
Hello, everyone. I just want to ask, when will the world wake up to the women in maritime and consider adding an addition in the MARPOL regarding the sanitary waste that a woman on board produces? Are we even visible, or are we still invisible?
Thank you so much.
No, but I mean, not all of us want to incinerate it, and although I'm an advocate of sustainable product use, but there are a lot of women who do not want to or are not comfortable with those. So in that case, when are we going to listen to them and write this in the legislature?
We don't need to write a legislation for that. I mean, it's common sense. We do it in our offices. So no, I don't agree with you, Reshma, that we need legislation. It has to come in.
The annexes to the MARPOL specifically needs to prescribe that because of the disposal of waste as such when ports, vessels are calling. That's one. The other is a larger issue, which you had mentioned, gender-friendly infrastructure. So that needs to be incorporated both in SOLAS as well as in the generic instructions.
Thank you very much for all the speakers. My name is Ashraf Kishk. I am from Bahrain Center for Strategic, International and Energy Studies. All the subject you mentioned is very important. Some countries like UK have planned to reduce a number of sailors. Okay, if it's possible for the great power to have technology to protect sailors, what about the small and medium countries like my region in the Arabian Gulf countries? We have a lot of restrictions to get the technology. And at the same time, we are totally dependent on Bab al-Mandab and Hormuz Strait. We have a lot of challenges. We have our own security issues, but we have restrictions even from United States with existence of Fifth Fleet in Bahrain and partnership with NATO. But we have a lot of restrictions. As a small states, we are in a critical situation. What are the options do you see for the Gulf countries to get the technology to protect our ships in our region? Because we have a lot of challenges, as you know, all of you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And if I can ask you to hold it for a second, we will just take the last two questions. Sorry, sir. We will continue informally if you want after. But yeah, two questions on this table. And then I will ask you to address all of them together before we close.
Thank you, everyone. So I was hearing the conversation about the inequalities being existing, and a lot of issues have been tackled with, for example, infrastructure, sanitation, and many others. But I think I have a question which is not dealt with in the room right now, and that is the continuation part of it. So when women are in some spaces like maritime, and people are talking about them having their professions in this field, there's this one thing about the work-life balance which is very much lacking in this space, basically. And majorly, if there are some, some amendments or some other rules or regulations regarding women taking some leaves, because I believe that women's life is too much extend, is a periodic life. Like you have period for everything, so there is a period for maternal leave. And maternity leave is something which is a big issue and which is a discontinuation of the work, work they're doing. So once they're done and the leave is over, the skill set which is to some extent depreciating over time, and how to come back and dealing with that issue is something which is important.
Yes, I'll give you my microphone, and then we'll switch to the panel.
I'm sorry, I think everybody agrees to me taking the question. That I would like to say, I agree with her that women's life, at a certain period, you have to do certain things. We are not always at sea. So for us, for Indian women, earlier itself, we have, in inside MUI agreement, we have 6 months maternity leave, which was just before me, considering the nurse and other staff in the cruise industry. And with notice number 7, 2019 of DG Shipping, we have increased the maternity leave. I don't remember, it's 12 months. And 6 months of unpaid or something, totally 18 months, after which we can come back. So now we have the maternity leave, and this notice was vetted with the industry, that is ship owners, everybody debated out and agreed upon this notice. So we have now, I think, 18 months. Now what is the other catch is that when men take a break for 2 years, 3 years, it is not counted as a discontinuity in service. For a woman, what I have seen, belonging to IWSF, a foundation which works for women seafarers, I've been finding it very difficult to get them employed. Like suppose a second mate or a mate comes down for her delivery, minimum she will take with her delivery. No woman pregnant can sail beyond 3 months, because merchant ship is not equipped to handle any emergencies that might arise. And all the time merchant ship is not in a a chopper lift area. Chopper lift is only 100 miles. We are tramping around the globe. So the lady has to come ashore. So when a female tries to go back, if she has taken a 2-year gap when she is a second mate, she is demoted to third mate. And then even companies doubt to take her. That is a scene. So when we talk of sustaining female seafarers, what now we have to consider, it's not only the maternity leave, you also have to consider the paternity leave, which I was talking about reviewing what we have, what India has in terms of Notice 7. So we have to consider paternity and maternity. And then we have to decide with ship owners how much part you can give to the lady as wages. Like it's 2 months, 3 months, not sufficient for a female. Because the pregnancy itself is 9 months. At least 6 months of lactation should be allowed. So somewhere how much you can balance out. So when it is a officer, there are regulations. Now we have to think about the crew also. An officer, a lady officer can be employed in shipping companies ashore where she can contribute very well in any rank because she has the experience of the trade. Okay, and after that she can go to delivery and then she can go on her maternity leave and finish her paternity. If she is capable of coming back on the same rank, be appointed on the same rank. But we should also consider the ratings. I'm still a sailing master. I've had so many ratings. India has produced so many ratings and so many officers. We have female ratings. Female ratings where they will be employed when during maternity. Should be a question. And or if they are not employed, will any type of insurance cover their long absence? Thank you.
Thank you so much, and I'm sorry we're going to have to stop here. It's very hard for me to finish on such an important topic, but I want to thank all of you and invite you to continue informally if you have questions for our panelists.